Good evening, dear audience of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. We welcome all of you to the first episode of Peacedays 2022 Festival webinar. Today we have invited a very special guest of our own, Darcy Ataman. Before I really begin the session, let me do the treaty recognition. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the original lands of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, as I was telling you in the beginning, this is our first episode in 2022 Peacedays Festival. Peacedays is a space that has been created to promote and inspire understanding, goodwill, and compassion locally, nationally, and internationally. It supports and motivates people who want a culture of peace and compassion. It encourages conversations and relationships that will inspire action, commitment, and the promotion of positive peace and peace literacy. Peacedays was inspired by Rotary World Peace Partners in 2003, envisaging the idea of a Canadian Museum for Human Rights as a beacon of hope for the oppressed, impoverished, and vulnerable peoples of the world. Peacedays grew out of a desire to celebrate the United Nations International Day of Peace, September 21st, annually. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's an honor to welcome our guest, Darcy Ataman. Darcy Ataman is the founder and CEO of Make Music Matter. He has dedicated his work to bringing an alternate form of music therapy to survivors of conflict and trauma. He developed the innovative Healing in Harmony program in partnership with Nobel laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege and continues to scale the innovation, which is currently running in 11 sites in 8 countries around the world. In 2019, Darcy co-founded A4A Records and Publishing with legendary producer David Bottrill, creating a groundbreaking publishing model for artists living in extreme poverty and conflict zone. Darcy graduated from University of Manitoba with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. He has worked internationally as a music producer, collaborating with countless artists, engineers, including Shelly Yakus, Levon Helm, and DJ Jay-Z Jeff, resulting in several Juno nominations. He is a contributor to the Huffington Post and various other publications, and he has also been a guest lecturer at Oxford University of Winnipeg and a range of international events. Darcy Ataman received Order of Manitoba in May this year. Without further ado, let me, gentlemen, welcome Darcy Ataman, and we are also very proud to have our advisor, Gary Senft, with us in this session today. Darcy, floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for that generous introduction. Never is it more uncomfortable to sit in silence while someone talks about you. But thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And again, thank you for the opportunity. As opposed to talking about the work that Make Music Matter does this time, we're going to talk a little bit more, even though it's related, a little bit more about my life, as an artist, because I still do outside artistic projects. This happens to dovetail into Peacedays quite effectively, though. So in particular, I'm recently returned from Ukraine, in particular Lviv, starting an art advocacy project. And the original premise of this was quite simple. I personally have spent the last over 10 years in various active conflict and post-conflict zones. But this particular war that's happening in Ukraine right now is one that the global stage and the world is paying attention to. So I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to humanize war and conflict finally. Let's turn all these statistics that we hear about on the news constantly, which just kind of numbs us eventually, and turn them back into flesh and blood people that walk the earth. And by doing so, hopefully we create more sympathy and empathy, and therefore a stronger form of advocacy to help keep this conflict in the news longer, so we actually do our part for hopefully a peaceful resolution. So myself as an artist, I thought what I would like to do, and what I am doing regarding this project, is to document a bunch of artists whose lives have changed since the war started. So I went over recently with a photographer friend from Los Angeles, and we landed in Warsaw and took the lovely 8-hour drive to Lviv from Warsaw. And over the course of those handful of days, documented 11 different artists. And see, this particular shot's very interesting because that is us crossing into Ukraine from Poland. But what you're seeing there is the trucker convoy leaving Ukraine back into Poland with goods and supplies and things like that. Or sometimes maybe empty, trying to fill the trucks back. What you can't see from this photo, just to give you some context for the war right now, is that lineup is literally 20 kilometers long, over. And it was like that on the way back as well. And since they search each truck quite diligently for weapons, crossing the border, if you're a truck, literally takes 4 to 5 days in the lineup. So when you're driving by, you see these truck drivers literally camping on the side of the road there, inching along just to get the truck out of Ukraine. So that gives you some context there. But the project itself, again, so I went and we documented 11 different artists. These were different musicians, so an a cappella group, rock band, traditional music, a violinist, but also a Penn Prize winning poet who was incredible, the art curator for the Modern History Museum in Lviv, and painters and things like that. We took a large-scale representable photograph of that person, which is going to be turned and projected into a 2-minute moving still. At the same time, I took a portable recording rig myself, and I worked with them as artists, as the producer myself. And if they were a singer, I recorded them singing. Maybe one played the bandura, so I recorded that, or guitar, a violin. If they were the poet, I got them to read one of their favorite poems. So I took that along with interviews that I conducted with them, getting their thoughts and feelings and their personal experience from this current conflict. And I brought it back and I turned this all into usable audio musical samples. That is being currently farmed out to a host of well-known Canadian musicians. In the last 2 days alone, I've had strong, actually people already working on it, from notables on the Blue Rodeo side, Sum 41, Billy Talent, Dabnett Doyle, Serena Ryder, Julian Taylor. The list got long very quickly. They will add to what I recorded and create this 2-minute musical vignette. That vignette will then act as a score to their own photo. It's like a little mini movie of their own photo. Each photo then will be an art installation. You will go look at the projected 2-minute image, either speakers or put your headphones on, and then listen to this 2-minute score that combines some well-known Canadian talent with actual recording from these artists in Lviv. So it's a nice collaboration. Hopefully together, this is a great art piece that will help, again, humanize the conflict and resonate with us longer. Because, again, someone who's spent a tremendous amount of time in active conflict zones in the last 10 years, numbers do not stick with you very well, but personal stories and things like music and art and movies, those stick in your soul. So I'm hoping to create something like that will stick in our soul, and therefore, again, mobilize the international community more to end the conflict. That is the premise of the project. And I shouldn't, well, I know I should not name specifics yet, but there is confirmed 3 installations already set starting late November, and this will have a large national exposure and splash starting then, and it's all very exciting. That is an expeditious intro to this project.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Darcy, for the intro, and we'll go into deeper discussion right now. By this time, let me welcome David Newman, our advisor to Creek. David, welcome, and we are having a fascinating discussion about the visit of Darcy Ataman to Ukraine, the conflict zone, and listening to his project. Dear audience, as I promised, we'll get into a conversational mode now with Darcy and learn a little bit more. And we have a couple of photos that he kindly shared with us this evening. And we are going to also display the photos and request Darcy to kindly give us the context. So before I begin, let me open the floor. Our advisor, Gary sent. Gary, why don't you go first with your questions or queries that you might have for Darcy this evening? Gary. Gary, unmute kindly.
Sorry. Yeah, Darcy, I'm sorry. I was just saying you had an amazing journey, and many Canadians don't have the opportunity to be there physically, that you've been able to have, and then the opportunity to meet individuals as well. And you were talking about, just the power of individual stories. So I wouldn't mind, Kauser, maybe you could put up the picture of Sophia. And this is one that's close to myself. Darcy had the opportunity to meet with Sophia Fedina, which, if you've been following our webinars on Ukraine, is a member of parliament in Ukraine, and has been very active in this sort of war with Russia, which really goes back to the 2014 era. And maybe, Darcy, you could just explain a little bit more about her, just as one person of the group that you had the good fortune of meeting.
Yeah, with pleasure. And again, it was fantastic to meet her. She's a very impressive person. But what was really interesting about meeting her, and again, we've been keeping in touch ever since, was that she is a member of parliament, and of course, she had her thoughts and ideas as a politician and her platforms, and she did speak about them. But what opened her up was her life as a musician and artist. That's where we bonded. That's where we got the truth. See, art has a fascinating way of revealing the truth, whether someone wants to or not. And she's a fantastic singer. So she literally just came from the front lines trying to put on concerts with some of the local priests there as well for the troops in the front lines. They were stopped short at one point because of shelling, and she came back to Lviv, and we worked together. But that just that demonstrates the power, and it's not facetious, the power of music and art, because it wasn't her position as a member of parliament per se that motivated her to take the train to the front lines and hide herself from the shelling. It was motivation as an artist and a singer to bring hope to the troops to do so. I mean, that's how she led. And that is how she's leading. So I found that very fascinating. And then again, highly intelligent. And then sitting in her office in Lviv, and I set up my microphone and a little recording system, and then she starts to sing, and it was incredible. Like, she's a really fantastic singer, and she really, came alive. And again, it's fascinating because when she speaks as a politician, I'm certainly not, denigrating that whatsoever, but there's a certain let's just call it cadence and sort of fenced-in nature to how when someone speaks as a politician. As soon as she opened up and became Sophia, the singer and the artist, it was completely different, and so much, frankly, so much more engaging and enticing. And she came alive because, look, that photo was taken right after we had our session together. And in fact, it's going to work well, but her official photo for the project is a little more stoic and stern, and I think it's because that was taken before we had our session. And I wish I could share those, but the roughs are all done. They're under post-production, and I know the people that have first dibs in the first installation will be quite upset if we shared in advance of the debut later this November. But it was fascinating to meet her, and similar to experience I've had with artists all over the world in these sort of hotspots. It is the music and art that fuels them to keep going. When you have nothing else to hold on to, you have that. And again, it sounds a little corny, but I've seen it from now Ukraine. I've seen it all over Africa and the Middle East and in Peru personally. That becomes the thing you hold on to is the music that's in your heart and that you express.
And as a producer, it still must be challenging because you manage to interview a number of folks, and you're always looking for that best side of the human to come forward through the art. And so, I'm sure that was very challenging. Did you have any specific experience with perhaps another individual that stands out in your mind? Again, this is a bit of a teaser for your final production when we'll get to see it. So bear that in mind.
There's plenty, but actually there is another photo I sent that has holding up a T-shirt from this band. If you could put that up. Yes. So that was the first night. So we ended up, frankly, we lost a day because of flight delays and landed 13 hours later in Warsaw than planned. Got into Lviv that evening, quite tired and jet lagged, quite honestly. But we went to work with this first band, the Baton Band, whose guitar player is a doctor. He's on the front lines. And what was fascinating, what broke through here, it was the music. So their English was, okay, not fantastic, but trying to bond with them so they open up as we work together as artists. I just asked them, it's like, well, you're a rock band. What's your favorite band? What are some of your favorite bands? And he had no idea at all. But he said, his favorite band of all time was Billy Talent, which is this huge Canadian band. And the guitar player is one of my best friends. So it was just such a wonderful moment because I literally held up my phone and showed him the text messages between the guitar player, Ian, and I, him saying, I'm going to play on your project. Don't worry, Darcy. So just to show them that exchange, their minds just, they couldn't believe it. And their second favorite band was Sum 41. Also, one of my, the bass player, Colin's one of my closest friends as well. He's also agreed to play on the project before I left. So they could not believe it. And I've since told that story to Ian when I got home. And he told me to tell them again, rest assured, I will play on their piece. It was just utterly fascinating. So much so that evening when we got back to the hotel that we were staying, and that was already getting close to curfew time, somehow the guitar player, who was on the front lines of active duty as a medical doctor, had found me on social media, on Instagram, and messaged me about the whole thing, so excited. So that's what, again, it goes to show you what fuel that can be. Like, you're literally on the front lines where the shelling's taking place, and this piece of music here just motivated him so much that he had to start messaging me super excited and how it's kind of carrying him through. So it was, honestly, these are things you couldn't make up. Like, they're part of the universe.
Yeah. It's still, a difficult time to be there, though, of course, being in a war zone. So you probably saw, evidence of, like buildings that were protected with, sandbags, and you might have been subjected to the sirens, even in Lviv. Along the streets, did you see any forms of art that you thought were interesting, just in that regard?
Yeah, there's on a couple of notes on that. One, shoot, I did not forward this photo, but the painter I worked with, who came from the East, lost part of her home from a shelling, and she showed me photos of a rocket going through her home, but had a good attitude about it, joked that I wanted to remodel and renovate anyway, so it's okay. That was the stance she was taking on that. Oh yes, that's a poet actually, and she was also incredible. But the other photo, yes, is it's fascinating that trauma and hardship comes through in art, whether you want it to or not. It's sort of a natural. It's like sweating. That's how it comes out. So I was working with another artist while her photo was being taken, and I came across, and I think I sent this one of the chalk art.
And so this would be just, on a street in Lemieux.
Yeah, that was just exactly on the street, actually in a park, by a playground, by the movie theater there. And that's what the kids drew, which is obviously concerning for a number of reasons. The biggest of which demonstrates how entrenched, sadly, this war has gotten. And that's the biggest thing that I learned from it, not to get too ahead, was I think at least most of us in the West are looking at it from a perspective of, okay, February, Putin invaded for whatever reason. Why is this happening? They're not looking at it from that perspective, or even the perspective of when Crimea was annexed. They're all looking at it from hundreds of years of tit for tat aggression. This to them. Everyone that I spoke to just saw this as a continuation. So, in fact, and I'm not judging it, but I'm just speaking honestly and transparently. The lady who was the poet, that the other photo that we put up there, and then the photo with that rock band as well. Actually, all of them said, but in particular those two, when I would ask them, what do you think the solution is? And I can't use this publicly in the piece because you just can't. But they all said every Russian must die. Like when I asked what's going to end this conflict, and that's what everyone said. And again, these are not people that may be uneducated and swayed by propaganda easily, or fake news, or whatever the case is. This particular wonderful lady just came from a poetry reading in front of 120,000 people in Norway or Denmark. She won the Penn Prize. These are intelligent people, and they literally all said at the end, that's the only way this is going to end, is if everyone in Russia dies. And so that is a little terrifying that way, because there's the concern of the opportunity to capitulate and to actually, try to come up with terms that can end this. But within the people themselves, you don't see that. In one way, it's admirable, and in another way, it's a little frightening.
And so they're speaking of a moment and a time and a deep history. But, we'll see where we get with that. Of course, it's very difficult. But forgiveness, we also do a lot of work with forgiveness as part of our peace process. And, the conditions have to change, but in the right conditions, amazing things can happen. When you look at the Rwanda genocide and the Truth and Reconciliation, and then the parties coming together, there's some fascinating stories of people managing somehow to forgive and move on and really change the dynamic,
I think it's an excellent point, actually. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's an excellent point. And in particular, Rwanda, because that's a place I've spent a tremendous amount of time in as well, working. But it came from the top down. It came from, one of the perpetrators of the genocide, the current president, Kagame. He made it a mandate for this forgiveness. So I think, in my opinion, to what you're saying, which I think was excellent, Gary, the same is going to happen. The leadership's going to have to be demonstrated that it is okay to forgive.
Right.
Because pride can be poison.
And you also, Darcy, got the ability to meet with some visual artists. And, you probably were able to see some artwork that's influenced by the war. I think you've got one more photo, Kauser, there that is an interesting example of the impact of a war on a scene. And maybe you could explain what this is about.
Yeah, I love this piece. It was the painter that, again, had part of her house destroyed by a rocket in the east. She wanted to report to me, to everybody, that because she had to flee, that her dog is safe and still alive, and she's very happy about that. But it was really fascinating because she told me that before the war, and I have this recorded, all her paintings had vibrant colors, landscapes, vibrant colors, joy. Since the war started, she said, I literally cannot use anything but muted colors. I just can't. My brain and hands won't do it. So she uses these sort of steel blues in the color of red and all the colors of the Ukrainian flag to do the art now. And this is one of the pieces that came out of it. And in particular, these are paintings of her three daughters making Molotov cocktails for the war in the East. And I thought that was incredibly poignant and powerful. So I ended up purchasing that piece myself, and I have it framed at my place right now.
Wow.
It was fascinating to see how, and again, I have this all recorded as part of her interview, how the approach to her art changed since the war. It's still therapy for her, but she, again, stated very clearly she can't even bring herself to use certain colors anymore because her brain just cannot reconcile that.
Yeah. And maybe my last thought, and I'll turn it over to David and Kauser, but maybe speak about the resilience you saw there. I mean, it's such a difficult time for them, yet the people seem to be so focused and resilient and united. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was really fascinating too. That was the other thing across the board, young and old. Everybody said, we're literally not giving up an inch of territory. What I was most impressed and fascinated by and almost in shock of, you mentioned how certain buildings must have been boarded and sandbagged, and they were. There are some that are on the windows sandbagged, and I guess certain key statues were protected, and there was a curfew. But other than that, they tried to go on with their daily life as much as possible. I was in a park and people are sunbathing and the shops are busy. And it was really interesting that way. I mean, so much so, we had 2 nights where we had air raid sirens. The first night getting in was the loudest one, and that was, at the time, admittedly, a little disturbing because I finally fell asleep, and then pitch black, you get woken up by this siren, and you're wondering what to do. And I didn't hear anybody scrambling, so I just kind of went back to bed, and that was it. But the last night we're having dinner, the local fixer and the photographer, and we're in a restaurant next door to the hotel, and an air raid siren goes off, and the young server just very calmly with a smile comes up to us and says, would you like me to escort you to the bomb shelter? And we said, what do you think? She said, I think it's okay. We said, okay. And that was it. It was kind of, really fascinating that way. Again, it was a joyful resilience because they are fighting, but they're trying to have their lives too at the same time. And, another particular artist that I interviewed would say, like, it's very sad because every week she has to on her phone go through her contact list and take people out that have died that she knows. But yet, she's still trying to make plans for the future, and they're still, trying to put concerts on again and live their lives. So it's a very interesting integration that's happening right now of the war resilience and trying to find some joy. That was kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary, for the lively discussion. Let me welcome David Newman for some of the questions or queries that he might have. David, floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I have a whole host of questions. This is so interesting and frankly uplifting hearing these stories. But Kaiser, I'd really like to have you go. I'm an interloper. I tried to get in on YouTube and couldn't, so I end up in the green room and now here. So you pursue the questions, and then if there's time left, I will certainly put some questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, Darcy, I'm curious to know about your observations on the situation on the ground as you just returned from Ukraine. What do you see in terms of the future of the conflict? I understand you briefly mentioned about Ukrainian people's feelings about ending the war, but given because you had been to war zone many a times before. You have shared with us in the previous episode your work in the armed conflict zone. So, tell us, for our audience, what do you see, given your trip to Ukraine, the war might end?
Yeah, and I can only speak to my experience and not as a political expert or whatsoever. I would not pretend nor would I want to uh, be one. But from my experience uh, in other conflict zones I've spent a lot of time in, say in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As much as it's murky and mired, if you step back and see from a far viewpoint, it's fairly you can easily see how asymmetrical it is. You can see the good guys and the bad guys and how it works. And the equation is clear and therefore sort of comforting. This is murkier. And the reason why I say that is on the news here, we hear a lot of the sanctions and everything that the Western allies are doing against Putin's regime. And even at first myself, I thought, oh well, this is going to work. Like this, maybe not work, but this will do something. For the everyday poor Russian, I didn't think so because they're subsistence farmers, so their life is not going to change. But I thought maybe for the middle class, which Russia had a large burgeoning middle class, and then for the oligarchs, of course, and Moscow had the largest penetration rate of new billionaires for a long time. So I thought in that case, maybe these things are working, and certainly Western media is touting it almost not as a victory, but with again pride. And I'm going to say it again: pride is a poison. We're putting all these sanctions, and look at the good that we're doing. Talking to the people on the ground in Ukraine, and then also getting those details from Sofia, those sanctions have done literally nothing. They're for our benefit to show that we're trying to do something, but long ago, of course, this was planned out. All of the rich billionaire oligarchs have workarounds with other countries. And it honestly, so Starbucks left, no big deal. Another coffee company came in, as an example. So those things that we think we're doing so well in, I think is that's again the scary part. Maybe it's for our own benefit or making us feel better. They are not doing anything to end that war. So I really think it's going to have to come down to the leadership itself. At some point, I know that's very difficult, but Putin and Zelensky will have to capitulate on some sort of level. Someone again will have to take pride down and do this, because if it's down to the people, that's what I'm saying. I don't think both sides are going to back down whatsoever. Which is again a little terrifying in terms of the human toil it could take.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question.
No, absolutely. I'm always trying to be hopeful about war and destruction. Just a quick complimentary question here, Darcy. So, do you have any plan to travel to Russia? Because I also wonder, what would you find amongst Russians about music, and can it bring these two nations or its peoples together? As you rightly mentioned, that music is the fundamental bond that people share with each other. What do you think? Is there any hope in there?
Actually, on that, that's interesting. You brought that up. I mean, going to Russia at this moment, I guess, would be pretty darn difficult just to get in, if not impossible. And in fact, even in Poland, because I drove those highways a lot to get there and back. You know, on highway signs when it says, you know, exiting so many kilometers or miles away, every time you see those signs in Poland saying, you know, Moscow X number whatever miles kilometers away, it was crossed off. So every time you saw the word Moscow in the direction, it was X'd off on the sign. So I think that is no pun intended, a telling sign. But in terms of the music, actually, that is interesting because yesterday I got a call from a friend who's in a very sort of famous global rock band called 3 Days Grace. And he was just heading to London to start the next leg of his tour. And he called me and said, you know, before this happened, we had huge fans in Russia and in Ukraine. You know, they were selling out arenas in Moscow and in Kyiv, no problem. And he said, what about Darcy, that we do a song? I will contact friends in Russia on the inside. What if we put the two countries together and do a song? You know, would that help? And so I think that is something we're going to chase over time. I would love to go. I just don't know if it's even physically possible. Although the beginning of this project has spurned interest from other potential people wanting to fund trip number 2, actually. So we shall see.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. The reason I was hinting at such a possibility because I, like many of us, we strongly believe that humanity has a common platform, and that is love, and that is non-violence, and that is peace. And I do recall there was a concert which was titled "The Concert for Bangladesh," organized by former Beatles guitarist George Harrison and Pandit Ravi Shankar in 1971, and it raised a lot of fund to support the people of Bangladesh, and we solemnly remember their effort, and we credit their efforts. So this is why I just thought that could music bring these two nations out of the war? Darcy, my last question maybe this evening to you is that your work goes back decades in the armed conflict zones. So in terms of, because you did run projects with people directly and using music as therapy, do you think the necessity of such therapeutic treatment in some of the areas of Ukraine when the war ends?
Yes, and well, in fact, I'm having those conversations right now. You know, thanks to my meeting with Sophia, we've been continuing that conversation, and in fact, trying to implement well before this war ends. So we've made progress on that already. She's talking to the Ministry of Health and to the military to see where's the best place to particularly start, and then a local partner for the implementation, and then, you know, we have to find the proper funding for it. But that is absolutely a goal and a dream. And I don't think you have to wait until the conflict ends, quite honestly. I think it's something that, you know, you should be doing now, because the sooner you take care of that trauma, the easier it'll be to get it out, so to speak. You know, it's again so fascinating. I'm still talking to other artists there that I couldn't meet that time because they were on the front lines, and you know, they're again on the doing the active fighting. And what do they want to talk to me about? The latest song that they wrote, the latest idea they have, you know, things like that. It's really fascinating how it kind of just, you know, keeps you going. So we are looking into trying to implement as soon as we can there.
That is a very good news. So, David, do you want to jump in and maybe asking some questions for Darcy?
You know, there's just a couple. This is fascinating, Darcy, and thanks for being there. Thanks for doing what you do.
My pleasure.
Do you have any contact or before going there or now with Melissa Martin, who's the Free Press reporter?
No, I haven't. I'd be happy to, but at the time, no.
That's
I'd love to
interesting
talk to
because
her.
she just did in Saturday's newspaper, the Winnipeg Free Press. She did a column, an article, quite a lengthy one, about her experience in a hostel in Kyiv, and really her experience was like you. The common language, if it wasn't spoken language, was music, and a very touching story about really the relationship you formed with a 16-year-old young man who had a guitar. And, the guitar was a great connector in this community which had formed in Kyiv. The other thing on PBS, there was the Metropolitan Opera had I think it's Ukrainian Freedom Choir musicians perform, and I gather the Metropolitan Opera has been very supportive of Ukraine. And the conductor of the opera is a woman, and she said that she was from Winnipeg. That was her background. And I'm wondering if there's other connections right out of Winnipeg, let alone Canada. You've obviously found some of them, but it would seem to me very, very interested in knowing what you're doing, and effectively could be a wonderful connector when you get back, that you could bring together these musicians, and if the expats from Russia, the diaspora groups of Russians in our city and in North America, likewise through music, could make connections. It would seem to be a wonderful beginning. I really thought that your and Kauser's questions about the after this matter is resolved in music, but the capacity to potentially contribute to a resolution through bringing musicians together, something that Gary has always been very good at, with his folk festival background and their interest in music and so forth. I wonder if there's any thoughts you have as to what we can do as civil society here in North America to help you.
That's
those sort of connections.
Geez, that's the great question and great ideas. I'm gonna frankly, to give credence to the weight of your question, give some thought honestly over time, but also bringing the local community into this project is going to be the next step. And in fact, Gary, I know we're meeting later this week. That was on my list to talk about, because I have more updates for you regarding that. So it's starting to let the community know about this is going to come down the pike. It's very similar, and hopefully this answers your question, David, in a roundabout way. It's similar when Make Music Matter goes to a new area, or actually doesn't even matter if it's new. We continually incorporate the community. So there's I'm paraphrasing, forgive me, but there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to give a man a haircut, make sure he's in the room at the time. So it's that kind of a thing. You can't exclude people from, even if you think you know what's best. So I did the first part of this trip somewhat under the radar on purpose, to shield some loved ones from where I was going. But I am happy Ukrainian as well from my father's side, and yes, the next step is to let the local Ukrainian community know. I was hoping through you, Gary, because you're the great connector, about this project, so we can start to make sure we're doing everything correctly. And again, sorry, that doesn't directly answer, but I'm going to have
you can using the legal term to effectively say, I can't respond now, I got to think about it. and that's, I'll take it under advisement. So you're
Okay,
taking
I'll take it.
advisement, and I think a lot of reflection on this would be good for all of us, because
Yes.
I think there can be some things that begun which transcend borders, and that's what music does. It also transcends the mental approaches to thing, and reaches from the heart and the spirit, right?
That's exactly it. When you said that it transcends borders, and it also has a power to it. So what you said just reminded me of something. So doing the border crossing, and that was my first time, Poland into Ukraine. There's many checkpoints. You're going through. I think it's about a half a dozen times. You're stopped, searched heavily, your vehicle, the visa, why, all those things. It was an hour and a half of that process just to get through I swear, 30 feet of traffic. But what was fascinating about it is, as soon as we explained the project and that we weren't journalists per se, or politicians, or whatever the case is, no offense, that we were artists and this is what we were doing, the customs people, they were so welcoming. Like, they just completely changed. Like, the guard, their facial expressions softened and they went, "Oh, great, just come in." Like, they were so thrilled. And it's amazing how that can, disarm, no pun intended. And that's happened to me, in Congo as well. I have literally been stopped in the middle of the jungle in Congo by, rebel soldiers saying, "What are you doing here?" And I explain I'm a music producer. Congo speaks French primarily. They start talking about Celine Dion. I said, "Of course I know Celine." And they were thrilled, and they let me go, and were quite happy. So it sounds funny, but you're right. This stuff really does work.
Let me quickly give you some good news. The Rotary Club of Winnipeg has successfully got approval for a global grant for the DRC.
Wow.
For educating females within the very challenged situations there. So once again, I mean, Kaiser's done with the same thing, leading a global grant for Rotary Club of Winnipeg for the Rohingya in Bangladesh in refugee camps. And so we're all working at these kind of things. But once again, teaching literacy is fundamental. But again, if you can bring music and art into that, it can be even enriched. So you're causing me to think that maybe those should be part of the kinds of pedagogy that goes into those classrooms, and bring the hearts and souls of these young people into a connectedness that transcends borders and conflict.
Yeah, and at the very least, if you do that, it will help retain the people that you need for the education piece. So this is a quick aside, but on the Make Music Matter end, our attrition rates are almost nil from our program, even in DRC. Is because people love going to the studio. They love the creating, the performing so much. And while they're there, even World Vision in Peru just officially said this for all the Latin American countries. They said, "Oh, this is the program that attracts and retains people." Then you have the opportunity to give them the other pieces, because they're going to be there. I'd be happy to talk to you about it anytime. And if you need, I will, as a side note, I'll be with Dr. McQuege Tuesday in New York and Thursday. So
I think you're speaking to the Rotary Club of Winnipeg tomorrow.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So there you go.
Yeah.
My last quick question is a broader one, and that is there a notable reduction in the number of males and children in your experience and your travels and in the city you're now in?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't think about it much when I was there, but two things that are related. Everyone I spoke to, every artist, every group, had either one of their group members or someone they knew male that was on the front lines. So that's true. Everyone that rock band in the first night was missing the guitar player. There's an a cappella group on the last day was missing one of their singers as well. Their sort of star singer. So everyone, and the poet was missing. Her husband was gone. So everyone was deeply affected by it in that regard. The other thing you see, and I don't have a photo of this on hand, is when you're driving, crossing the border and driving into Ukraine, there's billboards that will state, "Don't leave your country, stay and fight for it." Basically, like they're trying to tell people, don't go. So, yeah, I think that's also
What's
telling.
interesting is it's all so different from the Canadian experience, where the only experience we have with war is overseas, right?
Yeah.
Never right at home. You don't go fight and then you get some leave and you go back by vehicle to your home, right, and your family, right? So it's fascinating. So I turn it back to Kauser and Gary. Thanks, Darcy.
Thanks. Well, and sorry to finish that as you go. That's right. There's one of the hip hop artists that I've been speaking to. Again, frontline, fully decked out, and I'll just say it, in arms bought by the U.S. and given to him because he told me. And when he's going out on leave, he's showing me he's getting back to Kyiv, he's getting back to the West, and he's putting on concerts, and he's super excited. So, that says a lot.
So Darcy, one of the comments about the war was that Ukraine doesn't have a distinct culture. I'm sure when you were there, you were treated to examples of the great culture. Yeah. So we've talked about art and music, but we could not let you go without talking about food. Okay. Did you have some good food while you were there?
I did, because again, growing up on my father's side, Ukrainian, I had to, and I ended up. Actually, there was a lot of, I forget the dish. It's from that area, but I finally had authentic potato pancakes from Ukraine, and they're fantastic. I know. My grandmother used to make them for me when she was alive, but I was thrilled to go to this restaurant, see them on the menu, and went, "Oh my, I have to do it." And in fact, the fixer from Kyiv kind of laughed at me, saying, "Why are you eating? We got fancier things. Why are you eating?" But I had to do it. They're fantastic.
So the good news for you is Darcy, my wife and myself have been doing homestays for some Ukrainians. And one of the young Ukrainian women that was here with us for some time makes the best potato pancakes you can believe. So I can treat you to some of those from a home perspective as well.
Oh, please. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gary, go ahead.
I was just going to say, some people will hear this and it's a very serious issue, but the concept of helping out with homestays is an important one, because there are a lot of people, particularly in September, that are going to be coming to Canada. And so if you're interested, Manitoba Operation BlueSkies.ca can help pair you up with someone in Manitoba. So I'm only speaking for Manitoba. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for the wonderful information. The audience, we are at the end of our session. We just can't thank enough Darcy Ataman for sharing his thoughts, his wonderful vision about the project. We are eagerly waiting to see it unfolding up, and we can have a glimpse of all his ideas that we have listened so far. We want to end with a happy note because it is really a sad time. War has created so much of animosity, and particularly Creek is running a project on countering disinformation, and we have reached out to both the groups living in Canada, the diaspora, ethnic Russian and Ukrainian, and we also see animosity has permeated into here, right in Manitoba as well. So we do agree 100% with Darcy Ataman's observations that war has created so much of differences between people that must end. I would like to also request our audience to carefully listen to Gary's information for homestay, as he shared with us. If you want to refer someone, please do visit the website. And also, I would like to request our audience to kindly browse through Darcy Ataman's wonderful creation in his website, makemusicmatter.org, and you will find all of his works there. And please tune in, and he regularly updates his activities therein. And finally, I would like to end by quoting a very short quote from Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. He writes there, "Love hinders death, love is life. Everything I understand only because I love. Everything exists only because I love. Everything is connected only by that." Unquote. With this humble quote, let me end this session today. Dear audience, please tune in peacedays.ca. We have tons of programs coming in, including International Day of Peace 21 September event in Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Please drop in. It's a day-long event to commemorate and remember and recognize 71 genocide of Bangladesh. And with these words, stay well and stay safe, and we'll definitely meet each other again. Good night. Thank you.